Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Investigating Security Incident series brought to you by Everything Cyber. In this series, we have been looking at how actual security professionals investigate and analyze different cybersecurity incidents. In particular, we have been using Microsoft Sentinel and the log analysis language KQL to traverse through different logs and understand how an attack has happened, where the attacker has been, and what is the impact. So far in this series, we have been learning the basics of log analysis language. In today's episodes, we're gonna learn some advanced log analysis concepts that are gonna be really useful when we look into some mock security incidents. So Surya, what are we gonna cover today?
Yeah, sure. We're basically covering two concepts of summarize and project within KQL. The main reason for covering these topics is that once you have filtered out your sets of data or whatever you're looking at, you end up in a point that you still have a lot of data. You still have
Mm,
a lot of rows that you need to
yeah.
traverse through, or a lot of unwanted columns, right? And you want to filter these out even further so you can better analyze the information. You don't want to be going through like 10,000 records. You want to be probably going around like 100 or so max records, right? And the lower the amount, the better, because then you can dig on that one record uh, more in depth and gain more information from where you can go to other points of your investigation. So that's basically the concept behind this episode.
I see. So during an actual security incident, when we have thousands of logs thrown at us, it's very hard for us to quickly find the actual information we are looking for. So the skills we're gonna learn today, the skills related to KQL and log analysis, is some advanced functionalities that help us sieve through logs quicker and sort of extract the key information out. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, here we are. I'll just quickly switch my screen too. Just a quick recap on basic functionality within Sentinel. So we have a table here which is followed by a pipe operator. What the pipe does is that, hey, whatever results I get in this, to that, apply this clause. And you can have multiple pipes within a statement. Here I'm using the where operator to basically say where time generated for the past day, give me those
Mhm.
records. So that's just a quick recap before we jump in. So the first operator that I wanted to go through is project. So in this case, I've just run this particular query, so I'll just run it again. As you can see, we have tons of columns that we have,
Yeah.
and
Some
not
of them useful, some of them just blank, and
yeah,
some of them actually have some data.
yep, exactly. So we have like tons of columns going on and on and on. So for example, I'm like, hey, I don't need all of these columns. I just want to focus on, like, for example, I just want to know what records are there, who are the users, and what are their specific client IPs, right? So in this case, we can use the project operator. So I'll just show a sample here of how that would look. So if you see that now, those exact records have been shrunken into these four columns. And this is super handy because project not only allows you to like include columns, what columns you want to include, what columns you want to rename, or what columns you want to drop. It can also help you add new columns, basically, which can be a computational of like two or more columns that you perform some function on.
Mm,
So here I just have a sample of that. Here, I should probably comment the previous line. Yep. Just like so, in this case, what I've done is basically I've done a string concatenation and created like a new column called RC. And basically, that has the concatenated results of record type underscore S and user type underscore S. So
mm,
how do I actually use this, like this format? So basically, when you end up in a scenario where you're like, okay, I want to look for a particular user, or I want to go through this table and understand more information about this user, and you see that you have lots of columns that you're actually not using in your investigation purposes, it's a really good operator to use to remove those columns. Like you just like removing it out and filtering out that information and only focusing on the information that you need. The other really important purpose is this, where you're combining columns. So sometimes you want to like combine columns
Mm,
together or perform certain operations. Like you want to perform like sum. You want to calculate the sum of this or so on, or calculate
yep.
averages and just various function operators you can do on that. I just have another example, just like a scenario where you could probably use it. So here, like for example, I'm investigating an incident where basically the user Adele is having some suspicious office workload on Exchange. So I just want to know like, hey, what's happening here? So I select this, just give that a run. As you can see, there are tons of columns. Here, there's like many columns, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to use all of them
Mm-hmm.
just for the initial set of investigation. So what I can do is I can project what columns I want. So just run the project operator here. So I'm like, aha, I have a list of operations, what type of user this was, what was the result, and what was the parameters used. I see the first thing that came up to my mind is that there's some admin based operations. So I'm like, okay, cool, that's
Mm,
interesting. I would like to dig deeper into these. So I can select here and go further, or I can just like write a where clause saying that, hey, wherever it contains admin, filter that out. So I just do that. So now I just get the admin results alone. So now let's take this for an example. So in this case, basically the parameters say that and always delete Outlook rules Bob is set to false, force the value as false, and then name move to folder value junk email. And then the other parameters is basically a rule is being created uh, where subject word contains do not open. So if the subject contains do not open, then stop processing rules true. And there's a few other ones though. Let's see. Here, basically, body contains COVID-19, then delete messages. So basically, what will happen is that if ever body of an email contains the word COVID-19, then this user is basically like, hey, just delete that email for me.
hmm. I don't
Um,
need to know anything related to COVID
yeah,
19.
yeah. So you can just see some of the actions that are being performed by the user.
Just to understand what you're showing me is that user have been doing different activities in their own computer
Yeah,
or
and
in different services, right?
uh,
And that data gets ingested into our Azure Sentinel. And in using this dashboard, we want to see that, hey, that user is probably doing something suspicious. We had some alerts, and
mhm,
we now need to look into, in particular, into their activity
yeah,
to see if we can identify anything that can be mischievous or malicious.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So let's go to the next one. Summarize. It's probably one of the most used operators in Sentinel by far. What Summarize does is that it basically takes these groups of rows, sorry, the different sets of rows you have, and then it groups them up by an aggregate function, and then it reduces the number of rows you have in total. So some simple aggregate functions can be like count the number of rows based on certain columns, count the number or find the sum of these columns, average, min, max, so on. There are also a few other aggregate functions that you can use, such as argmin, argmax, percentile, etc. Here I'll show you an example of how you can use the summarize operator. So basically here I've just run this function. What I'm basically looking for is any events that contain the event ID 4625. So what this allows me to do is basically, hey, show me all the records where the event ID contains 4625, which basically means that wherever the user has failed their sign-ins. So let's see how summarize works. So here, what I'm doing is like I'm like summarize count by account type and account underscore s. So let's run that. So what it gives me is that what type of account is it? So all of these are user accounts, and who does this account belong to? Is administrator, admin, the different admin accounts, some user accounts, and so on. And you can also see in the end the count. So it counts the number of rows that this occurs. What I'm seeing is that there's a lot of failed logons for this administrator account. So there's around 10,000 failed logons. So if I want to dig more, I can just say, hey, where account is this? So let's go check some records for this. So, okay, cool, interesting. So I can go further down, like see, like, hey, it says here, okay, activity account failed logons, as we said, 4625 for that. And then I can go further down to see if there's any other activities that are related to that. Uh, or I can see like when did it start, when did it end, the summarize functions for that specifically. And then I can go further like, hey, so which all computers is this user basically failing his logon on? So if I run that, so I'm summarizing basically on the count. So here I can see that the user is mainly failing on this device, and then he
Mm,
has lower number of failings on the other devices.
mm.
So
So that is something very suspicious.
yeah, exactly. It gives you points where you can dig in more. So basically, I went from a whole set of records. If I would just show that, so it was initially like this. If it loads, takes some time. So I initially went from a set of records, like tons of records. I'm like, man, there's a lot of records to go through. It might be a bit hard to dig deeper into this. Then I summarized initially just to find like, hey, who are the users who are being affected by this and what's their account type? Is it a user? Is it a machine? So on. Then I found like basically took the first account that was there, which had the highest count, which was the administrator account. Then I was like, hey, so where is this? So then I went and checked on that. So I was like, okay, interesting. So there's admin accounts happening. They're getting fail. All of these are fail attempts. Where is this fail attempts now happening? So I went further one more level, basically to check on like, hey, so which computers is it failing? So it's failing on this. So
Mm,
basically, I can even combine this, basically add this here. You can just add computer and activity underscore s to here, and we get this results added on top. Um, and basically, what I'm trying to show is that I went from a large set of data that was
mhm,
interesting to a smaller subject that is even more interesting. And this is very crucial in terms of investigation, as this gives us more insight on what we want to investigate, like what is the exact important records that we need. And then from that, we can slowly start building our case against this incident if need be.
mm. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I do have a question for you, Surya,
Yeah.
is during actual incidents, how
Mhm.
do you build your intuition on where to look at? Is that something that comes with experience, or do you know a handy set of just operators to use, or is it a mix of both?
For sure, mix of both. I would say when I initially started doing KQL, when I first started, I was also like most people. I would highly recommend refer the documentation. I was not used to the language in the first
Mhm,
place, so whether using Splunk, doing SPL or other languages, I would highly recommend you to just try out queries, because that's the best way to learn is to just keep trying out certain queries, and from there you can slowly build on your knowledge on like certain topics. The next
mm,
step to understand like how do you actually investigate an incident, so usually there are a set of recommended steps that are given in pre-built queries. So if you're running a pre-built query, there'll be like a set of recommended steps like, hey, you can go about this, and then you can try to figure out how you can get that information that they're requesting, so then you can slowly start to formulate there. The other thing I would highly recommend is that if you have any friends or colleagues who are willing to help you out, that really helped me out and sped up my process on like where exactly I could go to find certain data sets, and then how I could further like summarize the data to make it more useful for me to basically investigate.
mm,
And yeah, just as you do more of these queries and more of these incidents, you start gaining a flow on like how particular incidents to go, what are the points that you particularly want to look at, and so on. Certain organizations for sure will have like incident playbooks and so on, where
yeah.
you follow a set guidelines on how you would go about incidents.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
no
for
worries,
those.
man.
And we actually can help out with the first step. All of our videos, we will have some exercises listed out in the description section. And we highly recommend you do those exercises before moving to the next video. Or sometimes the exercise is sort of encompassing the whole series. You don't need to do the entire thing. Maybe do a little bit and process what you have learned before moving on to the next one. And doing these steps can suddenly build up your expertise, make much more sense when we are doing those mock investigations or when we are working with playbooks.
Yeah.
That was it for this video. We'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, and the next one we'll be talking more about how we can join tables, correlate data, and have a brief look over those data sets in general.
Awesome. on to the next one.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.